Hi, I'm Neil and welcome back to my garage. What we have right here is we have a plant mobile that I built for my parents' garden. They want to be able to water their plants without having to walk all the way around. Let's go ahead and get started. Come on. Okay, so first thing you want to do once you get your lumber from the big box store, we picked up a 2x2 here, is we want to cut off this factory edge. Even though we're not going to be joining this on any other application, for me, I just like to get rid of the factory edge by habit. So I'm going to be taking this over to the miter saw and cutting that. Okay, now that we're done cutting it, we're going to measure the length that we want to cut our first strut at, which is 32 inches. So we're going to mark that. And then we're going to put that back in the miter saw and then cut our 32-inch length, our first one. Perfect. Always make sure you wear a mask when doing this. Next, we're going to measure another 32-inch length to match our first one, and we're going to cut that as well. Now we're going to put our pieces side by side and measure half in the center of our 32 inches at 16 and do an inch and a half total width for our other piece. Then from here, we're going to move over back to the miter saw and use the depth control feature on our miter saw so that we cut our half lap. We're going to start with the left, then we're going to cut the right. Now it's important that you take your time doing this. You want to make sure you don't get hurt. Now as you can see, I'm sliding over ever so slightly my piece and then I'm making a cut, sliding it over, making a cut. Doing it using this method is going to make it easier for us when we move this off the miter saw and back to the workbench where we have to take a chisel and take out all of our chips. With these thin pieces, they're going to be a lot easier to break than if we were to try to chisel out them as a whole. Okay, so now we're going to be clamping our piece down to the workbench with a spare piece of redwood, mostly because I don't want the chisel to slip off and puncture the workbench. From personal experience, that's no fun to repair. So we're going to lightly take out our chips, and then we're going to come through on the bottom and just slide our chisel through to try to get the notches out. Once that's done, we're going to be taking a piece of sanding block, and then we're going to go back and forth until it's nice and smooth. Once that's done, we're going to go through and test fit our piece and then move back to the miter saw and then also cut those half laps as well. So go ahead and enjoy this little time lapse while we take a quick break from my audio. Okay, so now that we're over here, like I said, this is the second method where I scribe the sides and then knock it out with the chisel from there. And this was my preferred method. This was actually way easier to sand it down and get it nice and snug. Then we're going to take our other piece and just fit it till it's nice and snug. Now we're going to grab that other piece, sand that one more time and drop it down, and look at that. A nice, great fit. It's not 100% exactly how I wanted it, but as it's going to be outdoors, no one's really going to notice. So now we're going to mark with the center of our drill bit where we want to put our two screws in order to hold these two pieces together. Now also note that I should have come back and put some wood glue in there, but I do this off camera, so just note that I would recommend that you do that. So we're going to put in our first screw, and then we're going to take our drill bit, and we're also going to mark for our second screw. Always keep it straight, and then do a countersink just because it looks nice. And now we're done. That should hold it for the majority of the weight that it needs. Okay, now I'm going to plug myself and grab my sanding alignment tool, and I'm going to use that to put my sandpaper on the sander. There's a video that I have for the alignment tool. Go ahead and check that out. And now we're just going to lightly sand this because when I did grab the redwood, it was extremely rough and there were a lot of splinters. So now this is what it looks like after it's sanded nice and smooth. Okay, with that, we're going to be grabbing a boat sweet swivel that I found online at Home Depot. So it's good for marine applications, which means that if water gets on it when my parents are watering, that's perfectly fine. And so we're going to be marking the slots, and then we're going to be taking a punch and putting in the center where we want our drill bit to go. So with that, we're going to drill just like we did on the other pieces. And this is going to mark where our center is going to be for the swivel. So we're going to drop the swivel down. And then we're going to be taking some 1/4-inch screws that I got from the big box store. These are exterior screws. Don't use interior screws. We're going to be using that in order to hold down our piece to our struts. We give it a little bit of a turn and now it works. Now we're going to be putting our piece there so that we can mark that in order to join our post. So this little block right here was just a scrap piece of redwood that I had laying around. And we're also going to give it those screws that we got from the big box store. Next, it's time to set the post in the center, so we're going to measure for that. Now keep in mind the post will be going inside a pole, so we have to shave it down. So we're going to move it back to the table saw and do 3 1/8. Now the reason why we're doing it a little bit big is because I'm nowhere near the site. So 3 1/8 will do for now, and if need be, when I install, I could sand it down. So we're going to mark where we want our holes to go. I was going to do pocket hole screws here, but I don't have my pocket hole jig. So instead, we're going to be taking off our seat swivel again so that we can drill in our screws from the very top. So we have to loosen all the screws again. And then we're going to take 3 long 3-inch screws and drill them in from the top of our piece. We're going to put some countersink so that we don't hit the seat swivel as well. After we have our screw holes, we're going to place it on a jig so that we can have a nice lined up surface. So we're using a 1/8 spacer with another 2x4 piece of square redwood, and then we're going to take our clamp and clamp it down so that it doesn't move. Then we're going to add some Titebond 3 glue, and then we're going to screw into our post. Then we're going to take our 3-inch screw, and then we're just going to put it in maybe 75% of the way, and then we're going to line it up with the other 2 using a speed square. Now I'm just checking for squareness, and we're good. So now we can put back our screws that we used for the seat swivel for their final orientation. Okay, now we can drop this thing in a vise and hopefully it works. Perfect. We spin it around and it spins on its axis. So success. We're actually going to be driving over to my parents' place today so that we can install the Plantmobile in their backyard. Hey everyone, welcome back. We made it to the backyard. Sorry for the noise. I'm going to go ahead and speak quickly. As you can see on my right side and left of your screen, we have the pole that we're going to be inserting our Plantmobile into. And then you could also see one of the limitations that we have as well is this tree. I mentioned it in the design series, but the only reason we could do a max of 32 inches in diameter for our mobile is because we want to be able to spin the mobile around without hitting any of these branches. Also to note that I didn't mention in my previous video is that my mom's actually the one who came up with this concept. She sketched everything and she let me know what she wanted. All I did was put saw blade to wood. So with that, let's go ahead and get started on this build. And that's a big shout out to you, Mom. Thanks. All right, now what we have to do is we have to check to see if our post fits inside of our pole. I don't expect it to, and it doesn't. It's about 1/8 of an inch too big. If you note in the first video, I did say I cut this to 3 1/8, but now it looks like we need to shave it down. So no worries because I brought a belt sander. And sorry about the noise one more time. You could see why I prefer to shoot inside of a garage. And so we're gonna switch over to voiceover mode. All right, so now that we have the belt sander out, we're going to take off what we need to in order to get the corners rounded so that this post will fit into the pole easily. I recommend using a belt sander for this and not a regular orbital sander because it's just going to be quicker. All right, after a quick test fit, we just need to round the corners a little bit more and then we're done. Now we need to protect our wood from touching the metal pole, so we need to put a gasket around it to prevent it from dry rotting. So you could pick up this foam gasket at any big box store and go ahead and cut it to size. All right, we're just going to put some staples so that it holds. Really, it's the screws that are going to hold this in place. The staples are just nice to have. And the reason we're doing the whole thing is because we don't know yet what height the post is going to be on for the pole. So if we do the whole thing now, depending on where we raise it up, we can cut off the excess. So we're going to do a test fit of the post in the pole right now, and hopefully it fits nice and snug. And it does. Success. So now we're going to come back to the workbench and we're going to add our glue. I recommend using Titebond 3 because this is an outdoor application, so use a liberal amount. And then we're going to reassemble this thing just like we did in video 1. We're going to put the block back on the post and then we're going to screw it down manually, just because I want to make sure we find the holes before we actually use the impact driver. And once we tighten it down good enough, then we'll come back with the impact driver and finish it off. Okay, we have all 3 screws screwed down now. And then we can go ahead and flip our Plantmobile so that we can assemble the 1/4-inch screws for all 4 of the swivel holes. And same thing, we're going to use a screwdriver and then tighten it down with an impact driver. Perfect. Now that we have that, we're going to test it and it works. And now we're going to mark the holes for our hooks. We're going to do about 3 inches off of the end on all 4 sides. And then since these are 2x2s, we're going to do right in the middle, which is about 3/4 of an inch. We're going to be using a drill guide for our drill bit. If you don't have this, I recommend picking one up at a big box store. I think I got mine for $8. And then we can go ahead and punch our holes just to make sure we get in the middle. And then our drill guide block is going to make sure that we drill perpendicular to the blocks. So that's going to be perfect for our hooks. Okay, once we drill, we're going to turn this and then we're going to drill our other hole. And then we're going to be using a 3/16" bit to drill our pilot hole for our hooks because that's what our hook recommends. And I picked these hooks up at Home Depot for about $1 a piece. I'd like to thank my friends for giving me this candle as a housewarming gift. I know they probably expected me to burn it, but it's getting a lot more use out of my shop. I recommend that for any of these hooks that you use the candle wax as a nice lubricant so that the hook goes in easier. All right, and now we're just showing we've got all 4 hooks in. And then we can move back over to the pole and we need to drill the holes for our post. So we're going to do 1 hole on this side, 2 inches from the top. And I forgot to use the correct drill bit. So now we have one that's titanium nitride, so that makes the job a lot easier. On this side, we're going to drill 1 inch from the top of the pole. So take your time and go slow. And then here we're going to mark in the center of the post, just so that we know where to line it up once we put our post inside our pole. We're going to do that on both sides, and that becomes an indicator for us to watch as we look at the hole. Again, make sure that you have the gasket go in perfectly fine. If I had to do this again, I would probably use some leveling squares to make sure that this thing stays 90 degrees perpendicular to the pole. And then now we want to drill in our first screw. Take your time, and then on this side, you want to grab the level and then drill in the other screw. Okay, we've put on 3 of our plants. We're putting on the 4th one and then still leaning a little bit for me. So now we're going to pull it from the back by adding another exterior 1/4 inch screw. Thanks, Mom, for helping me. I got her seal of approval. Okay, now we're going to spin this thing and test it out and see if it works. And indeed, it does work. It swivels clockwise and counterclockwise. And it's all good. Alright, as you guys could see in that previous clip, we have the Plantmobile up and running. It's fully functional. I'll probably come back in 2 weeks to check on it, but I'll speak quickly as it's getting dark. I'd like to thank my folks for giving me the time and space in order to work in their backyard. As always, I'm Neil the Garage Guy, and have a great day. Peace.